It's day 3 in the Nonprofit Productivity Summit, and we've saved some of the best speakers for last. We have somebody who's a good friend of mine and a peer and a colleague. We actually have kind of similar roles in our day jobs, and she's none other than Christina Lamas. She's the executive director of the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry. And if you're not familiar with NFCYM, as we like to call it, Christina's going to tell you a little bit about it. She's somebody who is just really talented at running a very complex organization. She has a lot of experience with boards, and her team is fully remote and works across multiple time zones. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have her on the summit. So with that said, Christina, welcome to the summit. And is there anything you'd like to add to that introduction?
Well, first and foremost, Mike, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm excited to be here with you today, and I think you've summed everything up in terms of my role, and I can tell you a little bit about who we are as an organization, if that would be helpful.
Please.
We're a nonprofit organization. We're membership-based, and so we really work with our members who are diocesan members. These are individuals who are working in archdioceses across the Roman Catholic Church. We also work with folks who are on the grounds, work in parishes, school settings, and then organizations. These are folks who are in a nonprofit world, but whose mission aligns with NFCYM, working together across the country to really empower young people to be missionary disciples. And so there's a lot of networking formation amongst the adults who are working with the young people themselves.
And a lot of listening. I think your organization does such a good job of just continually keeping kind of a gentle hand on the wheel, because it has not been an easy time over these last 2 years to be a young person or to be somebody who works with young people. A lot of kind of disbursement. Can we gather? Can we not gather? What's safe? And so it's been a really interesting time. And I really commend you and your team for just continuing to produce at a really high level. So let's pivot there and tell us a little bit about your team in terms of how big is it? How many time zones are we talking about? And how do you stay in good communication with such a spread out team?
You know, Mike, when I started in this role about 5 years ago, we were not remote. There was about 2 folks who were working remotely, but the rest were in-house. We're based in Washington, D.C. And I saw immediately the need for us to branch out into a remote staff. One, it provides an opportunity to really hire based on skills-based and hire the right personnel without having to focus on someone living in a geographical zone. And so that became a non-negotiable for me. So I wanted to bring on the right folks for the right position with the right set of skills. And so I began to transition the organization to a fully remote staff. And so I think the test for us was when the pandemic came on, the onset of the pandemic. We were already working remotely, which allowed us then to really move with where folks were at and to be able to be present, to minister to them and to meet their needs based on what they needed versus us trying to figure out how is it that we work remotely together on a platform that makes sense across different time zones. There are 7 of us on staff. We are ranging from East all the way to the West Coast. So you look at Eastern, we have Mountain, we have Central, we have Pacific time zone. We also work at the membership base that is across all different time zones. So for us to be able to adapt, again, was part of already our normal rhythm because we work with members across different time zones. But for us specifically, realizing that we were working primarily within the Eastern time zone and then pivot around that. So we identified this is the time zone that we're going to focus on and then work together around on a platform that allows us to be some flexibility to be able to work together.
So what's the platform that you've chosen? And then also in terms of that communication, do you have to fight the urge to send early morning East Coast emails knowing that you have people on the other side of the country?
I'll get back to the second question in just a second because it's a yes, it's a both and. But for the platform that we use Teams, Microsoft Teams. I think it's become a very popular amongst many different nonprofits. We did look at Google, but we ended up with Microsoft products, 365, and Teams is the primary source of our communication. You can set up channels, you can set up chat features, you know, when someone's on, when they're available, when they're in a meeting, disturb, not disturb. So it just functions for us. And that's the platform that we use. And yes, I do have to sometimes hold myself back from the urge of sending an email at, let's say, 9 o'clock in the morning when I know someone's going to be reaching at 6. However, because we have set the standard that we operate within the time zone of an Eastern time zone, I don't feel as guilty as sending an email at 9, knowing that it'll land in my colleague's inbox at 6 a.m. because technically that's when her workday would begin. Now, prior to that, if I do have the urge to send an email, I'll usually say something to the effect of, don't need to respond to this. This is just to keep it on our radar and FYI, so they know that this isn't something they have to attend to prior to their workday beginning.
Christina, how do you communicate with your team? Okay, you're expected to work X number of hours a week. And do you care if somebody is working 6 a.m. to 2 or 9 to 5 or 10 to 4? I don't know. How does that work with your team?
Well, I think I'll answer your question, which I do care. I care more from the standpoint of a work and life balance. It's very easy for someone who works on a different time zone than East Coast to work more hours because their day begins earlier. If their day is ending at, let's say, at 2 p.m., but it's 5 p.m. now Eastern, it's very easy for them to continue working until later in the evening. So I care from that perspective to ensure that there's a balance between the amount of time they're putting into the organization and their own personal life. But beyond that, I would say, Mike, the key word for me is trust. That needs to be a part of how we function, and it's a mutual. But there is a trust from my end to my employees, but also a trust from my employees to on my end, to be honest. And we have a very different structure within the organization. We don't have sick leave. We don't have personal time off. I have something that's called routine time off, RTO, and really puts the individual at the core and allows the individual to take care of his or her needs prior to then working for the organization. My philosophy is, if the individual is taken care of, they're taking care of their own self, then their productivity and their level of coming to the table is much higher. And it's over the last 3 years that we've had it in place, I've seen the benefit of it, and that promotes, I think, accountability. It promotes transparency, and folks are more honest with how they're managing their time. So if they are beginning at 10 a.m. when our workday begins at 9, they're more than likely to send an email and say, hey, I'm having a late start today. I'll be online at 10, or I'm working later into the evening today, so then you can reach out to me. So again, it just allows for the communication to be open and honest.
So it sounds like a lot of flexibility. Take us behind the scenes of you and your morning routine as an executive director. So not the before you get to work parts, but what makes for a successful morning for Christina?
Wow, let's see. That can depend on what's on my agenda. I would say there are 3 things that make my morning somewhat more productive and gets me going on the right foot. Number 1 is how I wake up in the morning. And so part of that is just a routine that I've set up for myself, where prayers needs to be a part of that routine. And so from the moment that I wake up, it's more of a gratitude prayer of giving thanks the fact that I'm starting another day, and I'm really immersing in prayer in that moment in my time with God. But also then acknowledging that, what are we going to cover together, God? It's a team effort between God and myself, that it's not Christina running NFCYM, but really taking the lead and allowing God's Spirit to lead. And so prayer is number 1 on my routine list. And I've noticed that if that's not happening in the morning, then I'm not fully balanced and things are a little off for me during the day. So that would be number 1. Number 2 is really creating the space, physical space in my desk. And so I can't have clutter. If I have clutter, I can't start my day. It's just in my personality. I like things to be clean, and having things organized on my area workspace, where it allows my mental space to be in a way where I can vision, I can function, I can dream, but I can also take care of day-to-day tasks. And the third is, I need water to be able to hydrate myself. And so as long as I've started off my day with prayer, I have a clean slate with potentially my to-do list to go for the day, and I've got water sitting right next to me that I can hydrate. Those are 3 things that I start off my day that I can then function for the next couple of hours.
That's great. And I mean, so many times, if a leader says, oh, I'm struggling with headaches, well, have you put into place some of those basic things like are working for you, something like hydration? Have you been drinking water regularly? Are you keeping yourself loose? And are you getting a good start to the day? These are the secrets of really productive people. Christina, how about the issue of, how do you either say no to folks when they request time from you or commitment from you or a meeting with you? How do you either say no gently, or how do you redirect them to a member of your staff? Because you're one of the most sought after speakers and leaders, at least in our world of nonprofit ministry in terms of the Catholic Church. You're one of those people that probably gets invited a lot to a lot of things. So give us the secrets of saying no gently, respectfully, kindly, without annoying people. And how do you do that?
Mike, something that I've had to learn. It's not something that came naturally. At the very beginning, I was saying yes to everything, and I found myself really stretched, in which I wasn't very productive, and my commitments were just check off list. And so I felt as though I wasn't giving my very best, both to the individual who was asking of my time, but also being fair to myself and being able to be present. And so I've learned to say no. Not always easy, but I've always mentally have told myself, if I'm saying yes to something, that means something else is going to give. Something else cannot necessarily continue as is. And so what is that priority? What is that number one thing that's coming off my plate so that I can say yes to this thing, whatever that might be, whether it be a meeting, a coffee, or a speaking engagement, or assistance on a project, etc. But I've also been very good at delegating, and not everything not everything has to come through my plate. There are many folks that I work with that are talented, that are skilled, that might be a better resource for what's coming across as the invitation. And so I assess the invitation and what it might be asking. And if it's something that I have the time and commitment that I can move things on my schedule, knowing something is going to come off, then I can say yes. But more than likely, I'm always looking to empower and redirect and delegate. And there might be somebody else on my team or within our membership that's best skill-based to be able to handle the request.
And any productivity software you use, whether it's Calendly or SavvyCal or anything that you use from a calendar standpoint that you feel like helps keep you productive?
Honestly, it's my handy dandy phone. It's a very simple tool. I don't use any other programs out there, but I noticed that if it's not on my calendar, then it's not probably going to take place. I'm very organized within my calendar, and so I have multiple calendars all synced into one. I've got my personal calendar, I've got my work calendar, I've got a few other calendars that are merged together, which allows me then to take a look at where I'm spending my time and where the areas might be of some sort of, I can fill them in, or I can simply say, this isn't my time to be, and I'm not going to fill this time in for myself.
You mentioned, Christina, that you're pretty organized, and that's been my experience of you as well. You said you have 6 other employees on your team, and I'm sure they're all very different. I know a few of them, right? And some are probably highly organized and efficient and all that. And I'm sure some are less. They're talented and they're effective in their role, but it could just be that they operate a little bit differently from you. How do you coach them to get to be more productive, whether it's be more organized, or it's get back to people more efficiently, or it's, I don't know. How do you coach team members to be more productive?
So one of the things we did early on when we began to meet remotely. So again, remember I mentioned earlier, we were not a full remote team, but then as we transitioned to remote team, productivity was high on my list as how do we merge and function in a way where we can be accountable to one another, but also be productive. And so we start our week with a weekly check-in. Listening to one another. We started at 10 a.m., but now we're at a 1 o'clock meeting, which is fine. I'm able to be adaptable across the time zones. But that meeting, it's really the purpose of that is to give us your top 3 or top 5 to be successful for that week. And so it's an opportunity for each team member to come to the table and to verbalize, these are the top 3 things that I need, or the top 5 things that I need for my week to be successful. And so what that does, it encourages the individual to come prepared to our weekly check-in, to have thought through what their week looks like, what they're going to be accomplishing. And then what that does for the rest of the team, it keeps the communication open. So if I know a team member is working on this project, but I know it's going to interface with something that I'm doing, then it allows for that communication to take place on the spot. And then you can set up another meeting down the line. So that's been a very helpful for myself as a leader, managing the team to know what my different team members are working on, but also collaboratively amongst the team to be able to support one another.
And how long does that last? What does that look like? Is that video or phone only?
Well, it all just depends, Mike, on what's on the radar. Ideally, when we first set it up, it was supposed to be 30 minutes, 5 minutes per member, 2 to 5 minutes per person. But those meetings have gone for 45 minutes. There's times where those meetings have gone for an hour. Typically about an hour is where I will then come step in and turn off that meeting and say, all right, we're done. If we need to reschedule. But it really just depends what's on the radar and what surfaces. But anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes would be the time frame from those weekly check-ins.
Okay, that's cool. Christina, how do you guard your time so that you can do what your board is expecting you to do, whether that's fundraising or casting vision or strategic planning? It's easy to get pulled into the weeds, right? So how do you guard your time? How do you look at a week and say, I have to have head down time, for these 2 hours on a Tuesday, or I have to have this donor visit on a Thursday. What's that like for you?
It's a struggle, Mike. I think that's one of the areas where I struggle the most, is being able to do exactly what you've just named. But what I've tried to do over the last couple of years is really, again, knowing that I function very well with my calendar, is be intentional and block time in my calendar. If it's in my calendar, it's more than likely going to take place. To the simple effect that I have to calendar my lunchtime. I actually go into my calendar every week and I make sure that I have an hour for lunch. And so therefore, if there's other things that need to be accomplished that week that I've been tasked by the board of directors, or there's a phone call that I need to take that needs to happen that week, then I go in at the beginning of the week and find a time where I'm not back to back with meetings, and I buffer myself. I give myself an extra 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after to prep for whatever the task might be, and then also to decompress after either a phone call or a meeting to take final notes, etc.
And for people on the summit who work remotely, that buffer is so important, because to go from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom is not really efficient. We do not want to promote that on the
No.
summit. Give yourself permission to get up from your desk, walk around, get some water, use the bathroom, whatever it is. Those things are so, so important. And, as everybody knows, many people signed up for the summit because they wanted the opportunity to hear David Allen speak. And David's been so good for 30 plus years about promoting the weekly review, this opportunity to just take a breath, look at the week behind, look at the week ahead. And I know for me, that's always on a Sunday night, but how about for you, Christina? How do you get ready for a busy week? Do you do that on a Friday afternoon? Do you also use Sunday time to get ready for the week ahead? And what are the kinds of commitments that you would go through during that weekly review?
I try to keep my weekends off of work and really limit that to family. And so my week review begins on Monday. Monday morning, usually I'm up a little bit earlier, start my routine, I'm at my desk, and that's when I go through what my week is going to look like, but also take a moment to pause of what was accomplished last week and what is a carryover that needs to be attended to the following week. And so that's usually happening in the morning before my official work day begins, and I'm actually responding to emails, but taking a look at my calendar, taking a look, and not just at my weekly calendar, but just even 2 or 3 weeks out of what's up on the horizon. And so I can, again, anticipate what's up and coming, and then make sure that my week is planned out accordingly with, again, there's times for breaks in between, but also making sure that there's enough time that's blocked into accomplishing whatever task or projects on the radar.
You're good. I've tried to do Monday mornings. I just can't. I'm just too hyper. I have to do it ahead of time because by the time Monday comes, I'm just like, wind me up and I'm off and running. So that's great. But I've heard from other EDs as well that they can use Monday morning to do that. And it's really about what works for you,
That's
and
right.
and just to do the review, to map a game plan for the week ahead, and not so much when exactly that happens. Christina, just want to start to land the plane. And what would be your advice? Somebody who's attending the summit, they're very mission driven. They feel like they have a reason for getting out of bed in the morning. They're really doing work that matters. And what would be maybe your number one or number two go-to strategies or tips or tricks that you would want to promote to these busy executive directors who are a lot like you and me?
I think the one thing I would say is a mantra, and my mantra is I don't have to do it all, and to really rely on the team. And so it's not Christina's show, but this is it's from my perspective, from where I'm coming in an organization, that's just really God's show, and I'm simply an instrument that's working together with the team. And so really allowing myself to rely on those that I could work with. And so number one recommendation, suggestion is this: we work together as a team. And so really rely on your team to move the mission forward. It's not a one person show. So I would say that is holding that as a mantra. And then number two, I would say it's take time for yourself, not to be so hard on ourselves. Sometimes I think that we think that we have to do everything, and we see this long list ahead of us. I know I'm very good with lists and creating lists, but also recognizing that a week is successful if you can accomplish the one or two things that are urgent and of priority, and being mindful of that. And maybe it's a phone call that you have that you've been waiting to have, and you finally got to have this person on the phone. That's a successful week. Maybe you got to run a meeting and that meeting was productive, and well, maybe that's a successful week. So allowing ourselves to be gentle and recognizing that we don't have to accomplish it all. And again, that we have a team that can support us and we can work with to accomplish the mission.
That's great advice. There's 52 weeks in a year. obviously. And I mean, to think about it that way, if we got 52 high value things done in a year, that's not too bad.
Right.
And
That's
so,
right.
yeah, I think that's great advice, just to be compassionate to yourself, and realize that a lot of nonprofit work is taking the long game. It doesn't mean we shouldn't bust our butts and work as hard as we possibly can every week. We should. We definitely should. We all know that. And a little bit of self-compassion goes a long way. So, Christina, thank you so much for being our guest. And where can folks find out more about you and the work of NFCYM?
You can visit our website, which is nfcym.org, and you can learn all about our mission. You can learn about the work. And if you're engaged and would like to become a member in terms of empowering young people to become missionary disciples, well, I invite you to join.
You've got room. All right. Thanks again.